So 2 days ago, Star Wars dropped a brand new Bad Batch trailer, which is very exciting. I've gone through all of it, finding all of the Easter eggs, and as well as, most interestingly, piecing together pieces of footage from it. So, straight off the back, we have the Clone Legion battling against the Separatists on the planet of Anaxis. We last saw this planet back in the Clone Wars. This is just before Order 66, most likely, as we see clones against Separatists with a NRN-99 tank droid being destroyed. Next up, we have Felucia with all 5 of them, as we can just about see Crosshair's gun on the far left of the screen. After that, we see them on Ice Planet with Wrecker jumping from what seems to be an AAT tank, before we see 4 figures emerging from an explosion with regular clone troopers taking cover behind destroyed ATT. Eventually Admiral Tarkin, because he's not yet been promoted to Moff, speaking with the clones in what looks like to be a holding cell with members of the Coruscant Guard standing outside, perhaps after being assigned to him as a form of protection. We then see the Bad Batch arriving back on Kamino, perhaps like a re-evaluation inside the ship, the Havoc Marauder, before we see Crosshair and Tech getting into a fight with other clones, and then training against a version of what I believe to be an Imperial security droid from Star Wars Rebels, not Dark Troopers. We then get to see them on what is likely Kamino standing to attention whilst Palpatine does his Episode 3 talk about the fall of the rebellion, as the heads of Crosshair and Wrecker are able to be made out in very brief frame, as well as all 5 of them being stood in the crowd where there is meant to be a gap between 2 separate squads. We can also just about make out some Kaminoans standing on the observation deck just above the clones. Then we get to see what I believe to be Crosshair. Many people are saying this is Commander Cody. I don't believe that, just because the new suit of armor has a very similar looking type of helmet with the same rangefinder and gun strapped to his back in a unique position that we've only seen done by him before. He also seems to be promoted to a new kind of like death squad, maybe, hunting down rogue clones, perhaps after having an inhibitor chip forcibly placed inside of his head. We do not get to see Crosshair in his Riddler armor for the remainder of the trailer. Instead, we see him in a company of this new kind of squadron. We also see Hunter and Echo attempting to escort someone with grey hair to their ship on what appears to be a Kaminoan landing pad, perhaps escaping from Kamino, after the threat of chips being placed inside of their heads as well. Afterwards, we see the Havoc Marauder approaching Zygeria before jumping into a fight scene between Hunter and a Zygerian slaver, as well as a brief appearance from a Brazaka species native to Zygeria. Next is what many people are saying is Zygeria, but it's not, as in fact Pantora. It has the same architecture as seen on Star Wars Databank, and is further confirmed to be Pantora from the large Pantoran population seen in a crowd cheering on a group of clone troopers. We also see a short glimpse of someone hanging from a large tower with Hunter disguised on a speeder bike racing towards them, but a also disguised Wrecker knocks out 3 clones at the same time. This is something we haven't seen the Bad Batch do before, as they always like to go in and out with a bang, making as much noise as possible. Instead of doing something covertly, at the end we see Echo getting new armor. This is most likely not during their activities on Pantora, but I wasn't able to find a suitable to place it. Next up, we see a planet from the Fallen Order, which is the scrap planet of Bracca. This is further confirmed when we see members of the Scrapper Guild wearing the same poncho as Cal did in that game as well. We then see 3 new class shuttles. We first saw these back in the Battle of Christophsis, when it delivered Ahsoka to a soon-to-be Master Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, before we see them come face to face with what I assume to be Crosshair's new second-in-command, wielding a flamethrower on one of the Bad ships, before Wrecker is attacked by what I strongly believe to be a young Iblis Maw. We see these similar on the Fallen Order on Bracca, when it has grown substantially in size from feeding on all the scrap metal being fed to it by the scrappers, before being saved by some well-placed shots before we see an explosion with who I believe to be Crosshair watching on. In this one, we have an Imperial storage ship with possibly the Bad Batch hidden on board, or maybe they've hijacked it, heading towards what seems to be Coruscant, judging from the lights on the surface. To find their own answers about what happened, is obviously they won't be able to go there in their own ship as they'll be wanted, or maybe it's being destroyed. We also see a new kind of droid being destroyed by Wrecker. I wouldn't say these are commando droids, they look more like security droids rather than separatist, in what looks like Coruscant lower levels, or another heavily industrialized area on this planet, before I assume they meet with the next Shand for a unknown reason. But we do know that she won't be on the Empire side, at least not for the entire time, as in chapter 15 of The Mandalorian. She reveals she is wanted by the ISB, that's the Imperial Security Bureau, possibly for teaming up with the Bad Batch and helping them escape from Coruscant. And I'm hoping we also get some answers about the origins of Grogu as well. Perhaps the Bad Batch maybe infiltrated the Jedi Temple and taken him for some unknown reason, which would link the episode into The Mandalorian really well as fill in some really crucial questions and plot holes at the moment. Then finally we have a collection of shots I wasn't able to place. A firefight between clones and what I have to assume to be the Bad Batch, judging from the blue blaster fire. We also see the Havoc Marauder being shot at by some unknown ships I wasn't able to identify, as well as 2 unknown R2 units, as well as a modified droid. We also see the same incendiary trooper as before, blasting someone with their flamethrower, as well as Crosshair standing next to some kind of explosion that forms a blue pillar from something I can't identify. We then have an awesome shot of the Clone Wars logo being burnt away to reveal the Bad Batch logo underneath. If you think I've missed anything, please let me know in the comment. I think I've covered this quite thoroughly, however, but if you think I did, then be sure to let me know.